just check if it's... Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian McKechnie from the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School. I'm the host for the webinar this afternoon on customer value propositions for servitization. We're just going to give it a minute or so to get the attendees all signed in. I'm delighted to say that we have delegates from over 20 countries joining us today. So looking forward to a really interesting session. Just as a reminder, for delegates interested in posing a question to our panelists today, if they could use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, there will be a section later on in the webinar where I will pose your questions to the panelists and help where we can with any insight and experiences that we have. So we'll just give it another minute perhaps for all the other delegates to join, and then we'll start. Okay, well, let me just start then. So good afternoon, everyone that's just joined. My name is Ian McKechnie. I'm the Director of Strategic Programs at the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School. It's my pleasure to be the host this afternoon to take you through the session that we have on customer value propositions. We have two speakers with us today. They will pick up upon the use of customer value propositions in practice, and also the experiences and the benefits of doing so. There will be a Q&A session towards the end, and there will be some details at the end of the webinar relating to additional webinars we have in this Servitization Live series, and that we can hope that you can join us for some of these other ones that we have on related topics. So let me just spend a minute or so just introducing the speakers today. First up, we have Neil Tumber, who's a relationship manager from the Advanced Services Group. Neil, as well as being one of the authors of the actual mini guide itself, has accompanied many of our partner companies in their own transformation journey and has supported many of these partners on visits to see their clients and customers to understand the customer value proposition process and how to develop service propositions that create more value. Neil trained as an electrical engineer. He's worked in many industries, in companies from multinationals to small, medium-sized enterprises, and he's always seeking to create and deliver new value for his customers. And I'm delighted that as a relationship manager, Neil looks after 3 of our global firms on our partnership. One partner based in the UK, one in France, and another partner spanning both bases in the US and in Europe. And then we'll have later on in the webinar, we are delighted to have Jessica Hard with us this afternoon. Jessica is the team lead for business innovation, strategy and innovation at Ursunkraft in Sweden. And the firm itself, they're long established, about 160 years old. They contribute to anything society and world related in terms of fighting climate change, creating better conditions for sustainable development. They want to make it easier for people to make better choices using either recycled or renewable energy in much smarter, more efficient and environmentally friendly ways. And they offer services to their customers to keep them warm, cold, charged and connected in a variety of different ways. And prior to Ursunkraft, Jessica was at Nederman, again in Sweden, where she championed servitization adoption within the dust and air extraction sector, and where she led activities to offer customers clean air as a service. So I'm delighted that they're both with us this afternoon. Just to set a little bit of context about the Advanced Services Group, This is Professor Tim Baines that you see in front of us. Tim is our Executive Director. He is Professor of Operations Strategy and has been a leading academic in this space for over 20 years. He is the #1 cited academic in the world for the term servitization and advanced services, and is widely published and written on the subject. Our group itself, based at Aston Business School, is a centre of excellence for advanced services, and we provide the education, training, and the research to a global network of like-minded professionals. But we also have the Advanced Services Group Limited represented today, so Neil sits within that group, and this is really where we share the intellectual property that's created with industry. Some of the partners we've added to this list here, they number around about 450 now. We operate with 10 global firms and a variety of regional firms where we all help them transform through their adoption of services. But you'll see some well-known names, and I believe Jessica perhaps has examples of some of these that she can touch upon this afternoon. But before we start, one of the big questions that we tend to find is, what is the elephant in the room? And it really comes down to 4 particular questions that people have. The first point is about what is servitization, and that's something the Advanced Services Group can help with. The second question tends to be about, well, what does this mean to my business? The third question is, what does it mean to my customer's business? And lastly, how do I get help and support? And I'm hoping that our webinar this afternoon will pick up on the second, third, and fourth question. To contextualize it a little bit, we use a business model framework in all our activities with industry. And this is taken from our customer value proposition for servitization mini guide. And you'll see that there are 4 quadrants there that represent the business model framework. The webinar today is only picking up on that top left-hand side where you see customer value proposition highlighted. And that leads me now into the fact that we do have a mini guide. It is available. You can find it if you're interested at this email address here, the web address. And we have reduced the price of it to make it easier for people to engage. And we're holding that price at a lower level until the 8th of June. Now, it's really my pleasure to hand over to Neil. And I think, Neil, the key thing for me today is, how do you find out what is valuable to a customer? Is that something you can help with? I'm sorry, can I just check? There you go, Neil.
Now you can hear me. Yes, I put myself on silent, sorry. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Yes, what you need to understand is when you're going to be delivering services, you're going to be needing your customers to work with you. When you sell a product, you can just give them the product and walk away. But when you are delivering a service, you're going to need your customer to do part of the work with you in order for them to realize the value that they would like to achieve. So it's very important that you really understand what is important to them. If you have perceptions of what they want, but don't test out those perceptions, you can waste an awful lot of time and money building something that the customers don't want, won't buy, won't use. So we have a process which tries to get underneath the surface of what you might learn if you just ask superficial questions or ask questions just from your own perceptions of what you think is going to be important to your customer. This diagram here is an iceberg. And as we know, most of an iceberg is below the surface. So as we go through our process to generate a customer value proposition, we want to get the customer talking about their business in a more general way. I always say to people who ask me to help with this customer value proposition process. Don't take salespeople with you on these visits. Your salespeople will be looking for an opportunity to sell. They will be listening out for keywords, and they'll jump right in and say, well, in that case, you need a type 4. And we don't want that. When we go to visit our customer, we really want to be fully listening and just asking really open questions to understand their business, to get below the surface.
And perhaps, Neil, if I can interject at this point, why do you need to visit the customer?
Because you, as well as talking to them, you need to see what they're doing, see how they're using your product, see how they're generating value. It might even be that if you could have the opportunity to go with your customer to visit their customers, that you'll really begin to learn what they're doing with your product and how it's generating value for them and their customers.
Okay, thank you. And, you know, obviously there's a lot to that, but what are the kind of key things that we should be listening out for?
Well, what we need to listen out for, we categorize it at the Advanced Services Group as pains and gains. And this little graphic that I'm about to run for you is designed to show you that they are not the opposite of each other. So if you understand that your customer or even your own organization has a current desired performance level, this is where you want to be. You want to be operating at this point. Pains are the things that are going to drag you back. Big, heavy weights slowing you down, and meaning you can't achieve that desired performance level. So one of the things you can do in the value proposition is take action to remove pains to get the customer back to the performance level, or finally up to the performance level that they desire. However, fixing pains is not a long-term solution. Ideally, as you're listening to your customer, you're going to hear some gains. Gains are opportunities to raise the game, to improve beyond what they ever believed possible. This can be sustainable. This opens the real opportunity for you to look at a revenue model that is triggered by the gains that they're making. And so, in summary, remember, pains are not opposite of gains or vice versa. The pains are things that stop people getting to their performance level, and gains are things that would allow them to do more.
Okay, so thanks, Neil, for that. To take that to the next step, what do I need to do to plan or design that visit to actually listen for these signals from the customer? So
the first thing you really need to do, and it's laid out clearly in our mini guide, is plan this visit. Arrange with a selected customer, someone who you know is going to be keen to talk to you, who is going to be willing to explore the idea of outcome-based services with you. And you might need to benefit from looking at our mini guide for segmentation, because it won't be the same customers or same segments that you can sell your products to. But having identified a customer, you then write to them and ask if you can have some fairly senior people to talk about the first two stages that are shown on this diagram. We want to start off talking about what is the environment in which their business is operating. What is their market? Who are their competitors? What regulation affects what they do? Get a real feel for how their marketplace works. And then in the business section, it's generally with the same people, but you then start saying, well, so what's your strategy? How are you going to navigate all of the complexity of the marketplace that you've just described to me in order for you to be successful? And here you will definitely find that there are some pains and some obstructions that are making it difficult for them to implement their strategy, and some desires or wishes that would help them accelerate into the achievement of their desired strategy. Okay. After that,
sorry, Neil. please proceed. I have a question from the audience that I'd like to pick up because I think it's really quite pertinent. But please continue and I'll add it when you're ready.
Okay, so I was just going to say that once you've done that, you can then talk to people more in the operational side of the business to talk about their process. How do they actually take their strategy and implement it, get it done through their products, their services, their internal procedures? How does that actually work? And lastly, you can get to talk to people who are hands-on with your product, asking them how is the product supporting the process. As I said at the beginning, if you take salespeople, they will tend to jump at the first opportunity to sell something, and we don't want to do that. In the whole of this visit, we really want to listen, collect the data, go back and reflect on what are the pains and gains that we heard about.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So I will pose the question at this point because I think Martin Carr has raised an interesting element there. He has said, when visiting a customer, which person and role would you target? A buyer, for example, might be the reverse of a salesperson in your example and have a specific angle or objective not related to your own goals. Martin's suggesting avoiding an adversarial communication is important. What hints or tips would you provide in terms of targeting or selecting that person?
Well, first of all, Ian, I would say that the mini guide does give some good guidance on the type of person you want to engage with. Certainly for the discussions around the environment and the business strategy, you want to get as senior as you can. And so you get a true overview of what's going on. And I think Martin's right. You need to avoid going to talk to the buyer. If you talk to somebody in procurement, they are directed by their current targets, and they are only interested in things that will help them achieve their current targets. Often when you start developing a relationship to deliver an outcome-based service, you need to be higher up the organization. You need to be as high up the organization as the individual who will see the full benefit across their business. So it might not be procurement, it might not be the factory manager, it might not be their service manager, it might be their director of operations, for example.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Martin, hopefully that answers your question. If not, please put some additional commentary into the Q&A and we'll deal with it at the Q&A session. Neil, before we move on, you've talked here about organising the visit. What type of outputs or evidence will you come away with, or what do you expect to come away with?
Well, we recommend that you ask your customer if they are willing to be recorded, either an audio recording or a video recording. You can use your phone for that, because what you want to be able to do after you've taken all of this, you go back to your base, analyze everything you've heard, replay the videos, and then come up with the value proposition that you want to present back to them. And you go back and you meet the same people and you say, this is what we heard and this is what we want to propose to you. And because we've been diving underneath the surface into the deeper part of that iceberg, you may find them say, well, I never said that. Oh, no, you've got that wrong. And you say, well, can I just play this back to you? Because we did hear that. It's not intended to be adversarial. It's just intended to make sure that you are able to justify the reasons why you're offering what you want to offer.
Okay, and I think if I can perhaps extend that again, Jenny has raised a question, Neil, and she's mentioned about motivating customers to take time with you to discuss these things can be tricky, especially a small company with a large corporate customer. Any tips on how to get past that challenge?
So the real opportunity for them and for you is to develop a closer, more resilient, stronger relationship where you are both benefiting from this new new way of working together. I was invited by one of the companies I work with to go on a customer visit at a time when that particular customer was struggling to get best value out of their product. And we did have some discussion at the time about whether that was the right time to go, because these problems were costing the customer severely, but the opportunity of going at that time is to say, well, we don't have to be working like this. We could be working in a different way so that we could anticipate these problems and fix things before they ever really became a problem. So looking for to encourage people to listen to you, you've got to have a genuine willingness to change, to improve their life against the measures that they think are important.
Okay, thank you, Neil. And Jenny, just to pick up on that, we will be having a webinar on the 21st of June, I believe is the date, on storytelling with Dr. Dan Andrews. And I think that might help you with that challenge of the small company getting the corporate buy-in. So Neil, please continue.
Thank you very much, Ian. And thank you for all the questions. Please keep them coming in. Okay,
so you, as your slide says there, what do you do with these results once you've captured them from the customer?
So my advice, I think many of the people on this call will have seen this staircase before. This is coming out of the research of the Advanced Services Group. As you go up the stairs, there's increasing potential for value creation, but also as you move further and further to the right, you're taking on more and more risk from the customer. When you were at the customer and you were listening and you identified these pains and gains, I find it very helpful to map them onto the steps of the ladder to see how they fall. You will probably hear very many pains and gains. You do not need to address all of them in any offer. What you need to do is put them together in a package or group that makes sense to you, that you will be able to deliver, and will clearly address some of those pains and gains. And you might, for example, start off by saying, let's focus on the ones that are around assured maintenance and performance advisory. That will give us an opportunity to prove that we can deliver these things, that we are able to monitor what's happening in the field. Or you might want to go higher up. But once you've grouped them looking at this, you can put them into a form of customer value proposition. And we'll show you a slide later on in this webinar about how to put that together. Then you take that back to the customer, talk to them about it, see if they agree, adapt it if necessary. And the final stage of our mini guide is to work with the customer to design some kind of pilot or experiment where you can trial, does this really work? Can we really deliver it? Does it really add value to our customer?
Okay, that's great, Neil. Thank you. I will invite any delegates to post questions through the Q&A for Neil when we get to that section after Jessica's presentation. But for now, Neil, thank you very much. And let me move on to Jessica.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Jessica is from Årstenskraft in Sweden. But prior to that, she was Vice President for Business Development at Nederman, who were involved in dust and air extraction. And Jessica has got a number of years of experience of transforming businesses through the adoption of servitization. So Jessica, I'd love to hand over to you now to take us through your experiences and to share some of these insights that you gathered.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to share my experience working with servitization and the benefits of using the empathy mapping tool. There we go. So as mentioned here in the introduction, my journey with servitization started when working for Nederman Group. And we started already in 2016 to discuss how to grasp the possibilities with a new business model that can generate growth. And we set the target to be able to offer clean air as a service instead of the traditional products plus spares. That was a very bold target in a very conservative industrial segment. Not only were we internally at the level of a product plus spares, but also our customers. They had very limited experience from both servitization models, but also on implementing connected products in their production. So we had to handle both the internal transformation and understand how to be successful in sales. And this is a very challenging and many times frustrating journey, but it's also very rewarding because you develop a mindset and tools to navigate the new business landscape. So I decided to make the journey again. Now working in the energy sector, which is under total transformation worldwide and has a huge need for new technology and business model. My main focus is on creating a national charging as a service business for heavy vehicles. And the logistics segment is a low margin sector, and it is their developed expertise in planning that generates the profit. When shifting from fossil fuel to electrified vehicles, they need an infrastructure that is reliable and cost efficient. In this case, we do not have a legacy to handle. We can directly focus on the outcome-based services. However, the team I have consists of colleagues from the traditional energy utility, so the need for internal transformation exists. And the market is characterized by new truck companies who does not have the fossil fuel legacy that aims for the transport as a service position. And we have the traditional OEMs like Volvo and Scania here in Sweden that needs to make the same journey we made with Nederman. So how to be successful with servitization and become a long-term partner? Nederman joined the Aston Roundtable in 2016, and I was a part of it until 2020. And one of the mindsets and tools we learned were the customer empathy mapping. When trying to become a partner, you need to cross the bridge. You need to listen to and understand the customer, not sell your solution. And I fully agree with Neil, do not bring a salesperson. So we carried out several pain and gain workshops with identified key customers. And at the beginning, we had a facilitator from Aston joining us, making sure that we explore the customer pains and gains in depth. Also important, as we have discussed earlier in the questions, is to have a full lineup at the meeting. In our case, it was the customer CEO, HSE manager, operations manager, maintenance managers, but also operators took part. And to answer with the question, how do you get this meeting? We actually use the salesperson who have the contact with the client to arrange the meeting. And he could say that they are coming from the head office. And when we also brought the facilitator from Aston talking about the Aston experience, it was much easier to get this lineup at the customer. So with the input from the workshop, as Neil mentioned earlier, you go home and create the customer empathy map. This picture here shows a generic result on how the empathy map could look like for a traditional market. But key benefits you get by using this method is that by crossing the bridge and understanding your customer, you build trust. You can make this the long-term customer relationship. And you get in-depth understanding on how to package and price your services, because that will be a challenge. And last but not least, you get customer testimonials that you will need advocating for the internal transformation. As you will face many of your colleagues who finds transformation a threat to their well-earned positions. So let us look at an empathy map in an immature market, such as charging as a service for heavy vehicles. In this case, it is almost all about the industrial environment. Up to 2017, the truck OEMs said that electrification is for cars, not trucks. Then Tesla announced that they will launch an electric truck, and all the traditional OEMs had to rip apart their strategies. So now there's a clear trend towards electric-driven trucks, but the transformation journey going from fossil fuel to electric for logistic companies is very complex. And as most countries have identified the electrification of the transport sector a must to reach climate targets, there's a lot of different funding alternatives to speed it up. For us, there was recently a short window open for up to 100% funding of your investments for a charging station. And that created a lot of movement in the market and of course attracted a lot of gold diggers. And it's not only the OEMs and logistic companies who are trying to identify their position in the market, but also facility owners, transport buyers, and of course the traditional gas station. And we have the born digital companies who see this as a very profitable and large market. So here we have everyone are exploring. And as there are new and changing factors in the industrial environment and suddenly create new preconditions for everyone, you can one day be the perfect partner, the next day a good sub-supplier, and on the third, a dangerous competitor. But having a good understanding of servitization and the challenges gives my team a great advantage creating valuable partnerships.
Can I ask a question at that point then, Jessica? Are there examples of partnerships that you can share with us that would be relevant to the webinar?
Yeah, I can share one of our largest partnerships we have now. And again, we are acting in a very immature market. And we as an energy utility have an excellent understanding of the energy system today and in the future. And the electricity trading, I'm sorry, I stumbled on that one. But we have no natural interface to end customers. So we aimed high and we have created a collaboration with Volvo Trucks. So together we now develop Sweden's largest charging station for heavy vehicles, which has its grand opening next week. And we work tightly together with Volvo's key managers and resources and aim to create a blueprint for a smart, cost-efficient and scalable charging solution. So understanding their servitization journey was key to land this partnership. And in the future, we might become competitors, but today, time to market with a valuable offering is of the highest importance.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. If I can perhaps take this session from you now. Firstly, for me, thank you very much for that insight, and obviously we can pick up in the Q&A section in a little bit more detail, and I will move us to that session now. So we have the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen for our delegates. If there are questions, please pose them there. I think I'd like to start with perhaps one for Neil, and then I'll move to you, Jessica. But Neil, I think obviously we've talked today about the importance of a customer value proposition and the steps that the guide will help you through. What comes after that? What's next?
So the mini guide takes you up to creating the experiment or pilot with your customer. And just one thing to say about that is that you don't need internally to create huge new systems, employ many more people and so on to carry out an experiment. What you need to do is find out what is it that you actually need to test between you and your customer. And if that means that for 6 months, you're going to send a field technician to visit the customer every week to collect data, that will be sufficient. You don't need to put all the IoT in and so on. So you need to run that experiment, have good, clear measures coming out of that. And then, as I say, possibly about 6 months later on, meet up with the customer again, find out if it's working, if the value truly is being generated, and then you can develop it into a proper offer. Maybe Jessica can comment on that as well.
Okay, Jessica, anything to add on perhaps where you went for your next steps once you had developed the value proposition?
Yeah, we definitely had to test it on the customers. So I'm sorry, I don't have anything to add to that one. But it is a journey, and you need to work really, really close to the customer. And I think transparency is one of the keys. You have to dare to be transparent with your customer.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And we've got a question in now from Ian Machin, and he thanks you, Jessica, for your presentation. And he asks, do you think the Scandinavian market is more advanced for exploring servitization? Or if not, where in the world do you believe is most advanced?
I'm sorry, was that for Neil or for me?
It was for you, Jessica.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. We are quite, we easily adapt to new business models and technology. Some may call us naive, but yes, I do think that we might be a bit faster in that area.
Okay, thank you. And Neil, perhaps the same question. You've got clients that you work with in the UK, in Central Europe, in the US. Do you see any differences in terms of speed of adoption of advanced services?
I would say it comes down to the attitude of your people in the different regions that you have. All of this about developing true outcome-based services, advanced services, is about building a stronger relationship with your customers. So where you already have that, you will find that people are able to get the opportunities to carry out this process, get the opportunity to run the tests, and so they will move faster than parts of your organization or parts of the world where people are much more embedded in the transactional style of selling the product. Okay,
and can I then add a supplementary question, Neil? Do you find that culture plays a role either within the organization or within the market?
Culture is probably one of the key factors. When you look at our transformation roadmap, you find that the internal organization, which is a metaphor for culture, is the key thing that's going to either push you forward or hinder you. And we've also learned from working with many of our customers and clients across the years that moving to outcome-based services affects everybody in the entire organization. If you have people in the engineering design, people in procurement, even people in HR who are not focused on delivering this outcome, then you will incur additional costs and you may even fail in your ambition to serve your customer.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So here's an open question, Jessica, Neil, happy for whoever wants to pick it up. But we've got a question from Kevin Rad. I know Kevin's based over in Switzerland, and he says, thanks guys for a fruitful session. Could you share your ideas on value propositions for external customers, and in brackets for consultants, as opposed to internal customers, in brackets for transformation department within an organization? So any ideas on how to deal with the value proposition for external customers as opposed to internal customers?
Well, I think this is an excellent pointer to the upcoming storytelling mini guide webinar, because as you develop your thinking around what value might be, then you need to be able to package up and sell it properly, depending on the audience. I don't know if that's helping, Kevin, but hopefully I understood the question.
Okay, well, thanks, Neil. Jessica, anything to add to Kevin's question?
Maybe Grüezi, because I used to live in Switzerland. But no, I think, like Neil said, the storytelling is really important, and you have to work as much with the internal transformation as with the customer. And the customer value proposition is, it takes time, but it's an important tool.
Okay, well, can I stick with you then, Jessica, because we've got a question from Lisa Bakir, and she's asking about how do you go about dealing with customers that might be a bit reluctant to share their machine data with you while you're trying to co-create new services together. And perhaps, I think if I read the question right, Lisa, you may be saying that if it doesn't work, is that an indication you might not be working with the right pilot customer? So is there anything you can help to shed light on any reluctance about sharing data?
Yeah, and it used to be a huge reluctance before the pandemic. That one helps a lot when all want to have access, remote access. So I think it's easier today. But we had to definitely choose which customer to work with and which segment were more open-minded to share the data. And if I compare today, where we work very close to Volvo Trucks, I mean, we do this, we have a common business development. So we share the data, then someone owns the data. But I think that's really important to find that customer where you can share and have the transparency so that both can develop their businesses.
Okay, thank you. And Neil, anything on about the challenge of sharing data or the reluctance to share?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that on your side, you do have full security systems in place to protect your customers' data. One common fear is that you will take it and share it with their competitors, so you need to be able to demonstrate that you won't. But having said that, the bigger picture is about making the argument for the value that will be added. If we share this data, and we do share it, it's not we're taking it from you, we just want to be able to view the data. Then if what we've spoken about together about where the value lies, then we'll be able to demonstrate that value. And one really important thing that we've not mentioned so far in this talk is that by the time you're getting back to talk to them about setting up an experiment, you've got to be able to have some metrics, not just talk about value as a qualitative thing, but as a quantitative thing, and say, if you really are interested in this extra 10 million pounds, 40 million pounds that's going to come from this new service, then please help us have access to the data that we need to deliver that outcome for you.
Okay, thank you, Neil. And let me just check here. We've got 3 other questions sitting in the pipeline at the moment. Jessica, one for you again. Paul Jackson is thanking you for the great insights that you're both sharing. But he's wondering, at what stage did you start to think about your revenue model?
Oh, from day one, for sure. We do it to create growth. So from day one, but you do not have the classic business case approach. You try to do this value-based and confirm the value you're creating with your customers. So you do not have to create this classical hockey stick, but to use more of the startup thinking, I would say, to identify the customer value and price it thereafter.
Okay. Hopefully that answers the question, Paul, but please come back if you feel as though you want to add supplementary points to that. Jessica, Kevin Wright has come back about the question of data again. And he's now asking, did you have dealers in your organization? And if yes, were there any challenges when you established direct data links with customers? Was there not a feeling that they were being bypassed?
Yes, that was a question, but we decided to not start with the dealers because we also have deals, but the dealers were involved later on in the process. And then, but you can also choose what kind of access you have to the data. So we can choose access that we have them for surveillance or for product development, but they have the access to the only permission to contact the customer. So I think it's you can handle that in a way that it still gives them the benefits of the connectivity.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And if you don't mind, Jessica, if I could stay with you just for another question. You shared the empathy map for the mature and immature markets. And Ian Machin has come back with a question about how much have the green agendas and sustainability affected the types of pains and gains you've seen with customers?
Well, in my previous job for Nederman, we worked with clean air as a service, so it definitely affected it. And in this one as well, so I think that aspect gains weight in the servitization discussions. And now with all the new regulations and understanding and the changes in behaviors and buying behaviors and so on, it has a huge impact, and I'm happy that it is in this direction.
Good. And perhaps, then, the same question to you, Neil, when you're working with firms, have you seen significant changes towards the green agenda and sustainability in terms of the outcome being provided for the customer?
I think that whole sustainability, having a positive impact on the environment, I think that's an underlying challenge that governments, through increasing regulation, are pushing companies to change. There's one company that I have been working with where, as legislation against internal combustion engines pushes forward, means that they will have to develop completely new products because that market will disappear. But actually, in that statement that I've just made, there's a wonderful opportunity to deliver a valuable service to your customers, which is to get the existing equipment that's already out there to continue to be relevant without the customer having to buy a new one. Therein is a big challenge about outcome-based services, which is that quite often you're going to reduce the amount of product that your customer will buy from you in order to get a revenue stream from delivering the outcome.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And perhaps if I can turn the question now to one of scale. Jenny has come back and asked if you've worked alongside startups that are already engaged with customers with a more traditional selling model. And if so, what advice might you give them about how to explore new value propositions in parallel with keeping the business moving quickly to get established revenues?
So I would say that the way that question was phrased, if you are having success selling your product, then carry on selling your product. You don't need to move into this area unless you can see that there is true value that would be generated by your potential customers from offering a service instead. One of the things that came out in Tim's book, Made to Serve, and I've encountered many times in dealing with the people I work with, is that the people who can sell product are often people who find it very difficult to sell the service. Product is very transactional. Selling the service is all about building a relationship, building that level of trust, as Jessica said, so that you begin to get beneath the surface. And from that beneath the surface view, you begin to understand where true value will be generated both for you and your customer. So it's a different selling process. It's probably a longer selling process. I think Jessica can probably back me up on that. But once you get the right customers engaged with you, then you're looking at long-term sustainable revenue. So it's really a strategy decision, I would say, for the startup or small company.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add there? Because I talk about you need to stand on two legs. You need to continue to optimize your current business, but also explore new business models. And instead of having one business model, you need a business model portfolio in the future so that you can work with many types of customers. So that is my advice too. And that is a challenge for the managers because they are normally trained in the traditional markets and not also trained with a startup mentality. And they have to make sure that both work together without creating too much tension.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. And I think Jenny has added a kind of supplementary part to say that she guesses it's a process that she integrates into her market research exploration of where she can add future value with the customer. And I think to a certain extent, a lot of the customer value proposition quadrant looks at these pains where you can alleviate pains. There are also where you can add new value by understanding what the market needs are and how you can deliver that. But let me take us slightly tangential again. We've got another question here from Marcus, and it's specifically regarding smart service providers. In Industry 4.0, what is the biggest challenge in creating value? Is that a question for you, Jessica?
I would say the main challenge is still to cross the bridge, understand your customer, and then set your customer value proposition. The technology is an enabler, but it is the relationship and understanding the customer that is most challenging, is my opinion.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Neil? Or there's one more question I've got here from Martin that I'll pose. Anything to add?
Yeah, so Industry 4.0, in summary, means that you can get access to a lot more data about what's happening out there with your products. That isn't necessarily of any value to your customer. It might be valuable to you to improve your product for the future. What you really need to do, and why we're offering this mini guide and running this session today, is really understand what are the origins of value for your customer, especially the gains. Where can you really help your customer do more? And then you will find that some IoT might help you, but you don't necessarily need it. You know, what you need is, what is that value that your customer will really recognize and benefit from and be willing to pay for.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to close with one question from Martin and then just summarize some of the materials that we've picked up on today. But Martin's got a fabulous question. He's asking about the internal transformation servitization driver, and how does that message differ from company with perhaps a low or middle market share needing to innovate to survive, compared to a high profit, high market share company that might not see any need to change to a value-based outcome? Any response there, Neil or Jessica?
So I have one. I was looking at company reports, and I came across a business, a large manufacturing business that looked like it was going from strength to strength. But when you looked at the detail, you discovered that their core business was getting smaller and smaller year by year. Their overall business was looking good because they were making acquisitions on things on the outside. So whether you're a middle market player or you seem to be riding the crest of the wave at the top, you've got to be looking all the time in straightforward traditional business strategy. What are your competitors doing? What are your customers demanding from you? What environment is changing out there that's going to drive people away? One key message to get to people is that if we want to stay in business for a long time, you're going to need customers for a long time. And if we can stick with the same customers by building a stronger relationship with them, that is proven to be the lower cost way instead of losing customers and having to find new ones.
Okay, thank you, Neil. And Jessica, anything to add to that?
I think if you're a manager today and you have a traditional business with product sales and you do not feel the sense of urgency to adapt to new business models, I think you need support from someone because things are happening fast now and you need to prepare. People's behavior are changing. The purchasing departments are not the ones that have been sitting there for 30, 40 years. It's the younger ones that are used to purchase with a different behavior. So sense of urgency is my recommendation.
Lovely, and that's a really good point to finish the Q&A session on, Jessica. And just my thanks to both you and Neil for your responses. On the screen now, I've shared just a copy of the value creation with customers quadrant that we use with our business model blueprint. We can share details of how to find the business model blueprint when we send a copy of the recording and slides out next week. There will be a slight delay. Normally we do it the day or so after the webinar. There's a 2-day bank holiday in the UK, so it's likely to be Monday or Tuesday next week when all the slides come out. This is a really helpful structure to start you thinking about how you want to build your own customer value proposition. As I said earlier, we do have a mini guide available that takes you through all the steps that you need to follow to help and understand, particularly around the empathy mapping with the customer. We do have other mini guides available. We have a whole range of them that cover the whole gamut of the servitization transformation journey, including many, many case studies on small and large firms that have taken this journey. I've just added into the deck here the contact details for both Jessica and Neil on LinkedIn. And as I say, they will be available on the copy and the recording of the webinar. I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear from you if you get any additional questions you'd like to pose. I mentioned earlier we have another webinar coming up on the 21st of this month, talking about engaging stakeholders for servitization. Delighted to have Dr. Diana Andrews, who created a storytelling wheel for the purposes of servitization practice. And we've got Dr. Paul Jackson, who is the managing director of a small manufacturing firm, but also featured heavily in his doctorate on the use of servitization models in SMEs. So I'm delighted that both of these will be joining the 21st of June webinar. And as always, a big thank you to Jessica and Neil for your contributions and your insight today. We've had, I think, 12 or 13 very challenging questions to deal with. And I'm seeing responses in the chat function now that are saying much appreciated and thank you. And the last thing for me to do is to thank all of our participants and delegates from the 20+ countries today. Thank you as always, and we're about a minute ahead of closure. So many thanks. Please come back to the Advanced Services Group if you have any queries or if we can help. And please reach out to both Jessica and Neil. I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear from you. So just to close, thanks to Paula and Christina, as always, for making sure everything works behind the scenes. And thank you for taking time out this afternoon. Thank you. Bye, Jessica. Bye, Neil.